I think you need to close,
This one or this?
yeah, close it, yep, because we're already on Zoom,
Mhm.
so. Yeah, minimize that, yeah. Probably make sure the audio works. Once you guys start, I'll make sure the audio works.
All right, we're gonna call to order the City of Sherwood Planning Commission work session for October 24th, 2023. We not need a roll call, but we do have a quorum. You want a roll call?
No. Colleen's good.
Colleen's
Has
got
it.
us. She knows us by name, by sight. All right, so. First agenda item is training conflicts of interest, public meetings and records, parte communications. And has everybody got a handout? Right,
Well, every year I like to have some training with the planning commission. And so I invited our new city attorney. Well, I guess, Brian, you're not that new.
About a year.
Yeah. So if you don't know Ryan Adams, he is our city attorney. He took Josh's place. And then we have Emma Gill over here. And Emma's going to be giving the presentation this evening, but I always think it's good at least to have some training about, ethics for the commission, every year. And I think fall is a good time to kind of have this little pressure. So with that, I'm going to just turn it over to Emma. And then let me.
Gonna share it from Zoom.
I do. So how, share screen. There we are.
Thank you so much. All right, like Erica said, my name is Emma Gill. I'm a law clerk here at the city of Sherwood. I'm a law student, so this is basically a position where I do some lawyer type of work, but I do not have a license to practice law or give any legal advice. So Ryan is here to help troubleshoot any questions I can't answer as they come up.
If you get a traffic ticket in the city of Sherwood. And it's the person you get to see, she's our city prosecutor for traffic tickets, so she does that and then she's gonna handle this tonight.
Yeah, so I'm excited to be here this evening. Just to start off, we'll start off with some financial concerns. I think this is probably the biggest topic for this evening. Generally, overall, biggest takeaway here is that your public office cannot be used for your personal financial gain or benefit. There are some limited exceptions where you are able to accept financial benefits. So you have your compensation package benefits, those are an exception. Honorariums, that's something that is a payment or a receipt of something that you get for something of value that you received in exchange for a service that you have done in your role as a public official. And it's something where there's not a fixed price on it that the service that you've done due to the custom or propriety preventing them there from being a set price. Honorariums have to be either under $50 or related to your private job or private area of expertise for them to be accepted under these rules. You can be reimbursed for any expenses. You can receive unsolicited professional achievement awards. And when we say gifts that satisfy statutory criteria, the gifts that we're talking about here that are problematic are ones that are given to you or a relative or one of your household members. And it's a gift that is not available to a member of the general public under similar terms and conditions, right? So this does not include gifts from your relatives or household members. Like you don't need to cancel your birthday party. You can still accept private gifts, of course. Any unsolicited mementos that have a resale value of under $25 don't count. Informational materials you receive, admissions or food and lodging and travel for things related to your role, those are not a gift that would be problematic under the rules here and count as impermissible financial gain. Your financial conflicts of interest must be disclosed. Actually, let me back up a little bit and just specify what I mean when I say relative here. Your relative is your spouse, and then any children, stepchildren, parents, step-parents, siblings, step-siblings, and sons or daughters-in-law of either you or your spouse. This also extends to those who you have a legal support obligation to, or those that you are providing, or who you provide, or who you receive from benefits as a result of your public employment. And then household member is exactly what it sounds like, somebody that resides in your home. When you talk about your financial conflicts of interest here, there's two kinds. There are actual conflicts of interest and then potential conflicts of interest. They both essentially mean that there's a chance that you or a relative or a household member will be financially impacted by the decision being made. It is an actual conflict of interest if it is certain. It is a potential conflict of interest if it is possible. The difference there is that actual conflicts of interest require your refusal and potential conflicts of interest do not. And then last but not least, you have your annual verified statements of economic interest. These, I believe, get submitted around April 15th of every year. It's my understanding that these are done online and filed with the city recorder. And this basically requires you to disclose any of your business and ownership interests and things of that nature. But I believe that information comes from Sylvia. Is that right, Erica?
That is correct. So Sylvia, every year in early spring, she'll send you a link so you can go online and fill out the SEI. And then if you don't fill it out, I get a follow-up email from Sylvia and you will get a message from me telling you to go online and to fill this out, because if you don't fill it out, there could be an economic consequence to you. They will or can fine you for not filling it out.
So it's required.
So it's
The
required.
SCI is required. Okay.
But you file it up with the state, not, you don't file it with Sylvia, you file it with the
Correct.
state.
Okay.
You go to the state website and fill out information.
Are there any questions on any of the financial concerns?
What type of, I haven't looked at it, and staff is not required to do that, interestingly, right? Or do we do that?
Staff's not required.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
No,
City
not the
manager, I
SEI.
think is, I believe, but staff's not.
What, just to broach that a little bit, what type of interest should the commissioners be reporting on that SCI?
On the SCI, that would be the businesses you have an ownership interest in, or any other property you have ownership interest in, I believe. And then
Stocks, no stocks?
that, for rhyme on.
Yeah, I mean, really anything like that. Look, at the end of the day, what the Oregon Government Ethics Commission wants to see is that you're not making decisions based on things you have financial interest in, right? So they really want to know this type of thing. And by the way, these documents are public, right? So you can go on tonight, search for the Oregon Ethics Commission, FBI, and look up any elected official Oregon's or unelected in our case. Look up their SCI. So yeah, you do have to put all your financial stuff on there, but just keep in mind it is.
I'm gonna ask a nuanced question if I'm not holding this up too much, like, so commissioners are all required to live in the city that they're, they have to live in Sherwood, staff does not, so. We're talking about concept plans. Or the UGB neighborhood plans, even development that's close to their houses, is that a conflict of interest? And you need to report that out.
What do you mean?
No, meaning, I'm thinking mainly land use applications or these planning documents. So, Gene lives somewhat close to all land development.
Or are you gonna get into actual versus perceived conflicts of interest here?
Yeah, that's on a later slide.
Okay, so we'll answer that down the road. No, I don't want to get ahead of them here. She's got a slide on.
Sorry, Emma, go ahead.
It's okay, I know you're really excited, Eric.
I'm very interested, actually.
All right, so moving on to public meetings law, generally speaking, this is just what guarantees that all meetings of governing bodies, it applies to all of those, and it ensures that the public has adequate notice and a way to access or participate where applicable, broadly speaking. A meeting is the convening of a governing body of a public body that requires a quorum to decide or deliberate on a matter. Kind of a lot. Convening means that you are gathering together physically or meeting electronically. That can be either live on Zoom or asynchronously, or it can be when you're using an intermediary to communicate. This also extends to serial electronic written communications, which is a bit of a mouthful, and I'll explain a little bit more of what that means here in a moment. A quorum is a really fancy way for our purposes of just saying a majority of the planning commission. So public meetings law applies to communications that are about the matters that come before the planning commission. There are exceptions. It does not extend to any communications that you all have with each other. If they are unrelated to your role here, if they are purely social, or if they're non-substantive, for example, like scheduling issues, that is not subject to public meetings law. That being said, it's always important to be mindful of when that might switch into something that is considered a public meeting, just because you don't want to be in violation of public meetings law, so be cautious as you have those communications. Are there any questions about that before I explain what the serial communications piece of this is?
Does that apply for quasi judicial and legislative, or can we discuss legislative?
Anytime, anything that is, I think the law says. Oh, like, that could come before you for a vote, or is likely to come before you for a vote, it doesn't matter if it's quasi judicial, it doesn't matter if it's legislative, if it could come before you for a vote, you're talking to. Council, planning commission, problematic. Does that answer the?
Unless we disclose it.
No.
Yeah.
You can't, no, that's sort of gets around the intent of the public meeting law, right? So the intent of the public meeting law is for our communications to be open to the public, right?
So if we're doing a forum, I was thinking if I called Commissioner Whiteola and asked a question about a legislative matter, it's not a forum, at that point, it's just a discussion.
And then what Emma's getting at, if you have another one on serial, or are you gonna?
Yeah, that's gonna be next. Yeah, let's get there, because that might answer
Yeah.
some questions.
Well, yeah.
So you can't, I've got some smiley faces up here, and you can't see there's 4 up in the corner, so this is our pretend governing body, right? So we've got a group of 9, so majority here is 5. So,
Sorry, go back. There we go.
things. So essentially, serial communications are a series of one-on-one individual communications that ultimately result in a de facto quorum, right? So here, for example, we've got the blue smiley face that has gone and had conversations with 4 other people. So 5 have deliberated on this issue that is likely to come before the governing body. And that information of prior conversations is being relayed. So ultimately you are deliberating, the blue smiley face here is deliberating and making a decision. A quorum has done that. And that is something that is a public meeting that needs to be done in the eyes of the public, right? So it's kind of like a very sophisticated game of telephone. So it can look something like this, where you have one person being the common denominator, or it can look something more like this, right? So you've got 2 smaller groups and you still don't have a group of 5 to make a majority, suffice it to be a quorum quite yet, but then as soon as the blue and the yellow smiley face, as soon as the blue and the yellow start to have a conversation and relay the information that was communicated before, you have ultimately formed a de facto quorum. So it can get a little tricky and sticky, so just use good caution on that. Does that answer the question about that you had earlier?
It's before a meeting and just 2 of us discuss. That's not a forum.
Right, that's not a quorum, so that's not a meeting that's as defined by Oregon statute for public meetings law.
But if I was to take that conversation and call it tie, all of a sudden we're starting to push towards getting sticky, right?
Yes.
Got it.
Right.
And then reply all.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. That's the meeting.
That's a meeting. And reply all email.
So this applies for all legislative matters as well, because legislative, you can talk to any citizens anytime, but for some reason I can't talk to other people in this group, if it's too many of them.
That's right.
Interesting.
Yeah, the whole point of the open meetings law is to make information free and accessible to citizens, in this case, for Sherwood, right? So the state of Oregon has decided they want you to have those conversations when the meeting is noticed. And when it's a case like this, right, when it's online, so people can watch it, right? So they don't want you to have a conversation with Gene and then, it's easy to forget those things and maybe not synthesize it the right way when you're trying to repeat it. So they say, if you're gonna have a conversation with everybody, have it in the public after a properly noticed meeting, where the public gets to show up or have a chance to show up. Does that make sense? No problem talking to citizens.
So as a commissioner, if we're not able to attend a meeting, our best practice then would be to jot our notes down and send it to staff, so we can go with that.
Yep.
Comment then.
Yeah. Perfect response.
Essentially, the serial communications is including that in the definition of convening, is making sure there's not this little workaround where, well, technically we didn't all meet together. I just talked to them and I happened to talk to them. It's cutting off that loophole, right, is my understanding of it. Yeah, are there any more questions about that? All right, so public records law, this applies to any writing that relates to the public business. That makes it a public record, and it is the city's responsibility to maintain all of those records and make them accessible to the public as needed. Not everything is subject to disclosure. There is kind of a laundry list of exemptions in statute. And that ranges from personal information to trade secrets, to litigation information, to certain law enforcement records, kind of a big, broad laundry list of things that is up to the city recorder and the city attorney to determine whether they are disclosable. But for your purposes, the important thing to keep in mind is that if it is a writing that relates to the public's business, so your roles as planning commissioners, it does become a public record regardless of whether it is on a private server or device. Does that make sense? Is that clear? Any questions?
Just to reiterate that, right? This is a problem a lot of times. It's always really awkward when this happens, but like you're having text message conversations on your personal cell phone. You're talking to another counselor or another planning commissioner. That's a public record. If you're talking about what you were likely to vote on, right, or a matter of public business, like that can be, you can be compelled to do that. So, you know, it's always a good idea to have phone conversations on that kind of stuff, because the same thing applies to your personal emails. Just keep that in mind. I know it's like the way we communicate today, it's pretty ubiquitous that we use our text messaging and all that, but somebody keep in mind.
This is applied to our conversation with our council liaison,
Yeah, it does. That's a public record. You guys are all public officials here.
but the meeting laws, do those?
Mhm.
Cause he's not part of our.
I would not count for the quorum.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. I don't think he does. I think you can have a conversation with Ian, just like he's any other citizen.
One more on the quorum thing. What about on social media? You go on there, or some big forum, there's lots of Sherwood groups. You make a comment about something. Or other commissioners happen to be on that forum, they see it,
Yeah, I think that would,
generated.
I think that would, you know, is, so just so we're clear, the Oregon Government Ethics Commission is the public body that's appointed to look into this, make decisions if there's like a community penalty or something like that. And I think one of the things they would consider is like how egregious the violation was. If it's out in the public like that, it's probably gonna be a mitigating circumstance, but is it a technical violation of the law? Yeah, I think so, because it wasn't a noticed meeting, right? You're just on social media doing that, so it gets complex.
interesting.
Yeah,
I mean, public officials should pretty much stay off of all social media public forums, because anybody else can see it, can certainly be a meeting.
it gets complicated like that, right? So yeah, I mean, it's wow. And keep in mind that these laws were written, right? Like way before text
Prior,
messaging,
yeah.
way before social media. So like as technology, you know, transforms it gets complex.
And you guys have, just on that note, everyone has a city email. Tyler Barnes didn't have one. Did we not? Is it? IT's not here. You haven't had one. Is it our policy to get everyone one?
Yes, and it's just. It has to go on the cell phone, and our IT person needs to get together
Mhm,
with Corey
mhm, mhm.
to make sure that it's all synced up, and we just haven't done that. Tyler is all synced up now.
He's good. Okay,
Yes.
so we can do that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Is it just a scheduling issue or
I just
Yeah.
haven't heard from him. I didn't.
from IT?
Yeah,
Okay, we'll follow up.
yeah,
We'll follow up. And my point in bringing that up is if you guys want to be sure, you know, have some separation between your public office role and your private phone. What I'd recommend is just always do your communication through the email that we have set up for you.
Mm.
And that way, if anyone comes knocking, I think it's pretty unlikely, but it could happen. And so if that's the case, you can say with confidence here, yeah, I've done all my communication through this Sherwood email, go at it, you know, and they don't have any right to get into your personal stuff. So is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if there was a question, basically what would happen is if somebody wanted to sue, they could ask a judge to wish you to turn over your private stuff, and then the city would obviously step in, my office would step in, and we would look into that and help you, obviously, with the outside counsel references. So you would have some protection there, but I didn't know that we had email addresses for planning commissioners. and
Yes.
commissions. That's a great thing.
mhm,
Yeah. So we'll follow up, get you set up on that.
And regardless of what you do on your own device, as far as deleting emails, the servers here keep a backup of everything that is received and sent, so you don't need to retain it yourself on your device. It's retained here But everything is retained as well. Be aware of them.
Next one, or are we on this one?
Oh, we got one more.
Okay.
Alright, impartiality. So, the planning commission is an impartial tribunal, right? So we have to be free of actual bias, actual conflicts of interest, and undisclosed ex parte communications. So your actual bias can be established from pre-judgment, and that is shown with a pre-existing commitment or any prior pledges or explicit statements that you might have made. And then it also comes from an actual conflict of interest. So this goes back to kind of what we were talking about earlier, where if it is something that is going to affect you, your household member, or your relative, and it is certain that it will, then it becomes the actual conflict of interest. All conflicts must be disclosed, but actual conflicts of interest require recusal. And then ex parte communications is a really fancy way of describing a conversation that happens between a party and the decision maker off the record about something that is likely to affect the decision. So any of those off the record conversations have to be disclosed on the record, and if any other parties involved have to have a chance to respond to those. Are there any questions about that?
You may have addressed this before I had come in, but I just wanted to confirm, sometimes when people speak about conflict of interest, they, and especially like people in the public, will often refer to it in a way that doesn't necessarily have a direct financial impact. In the way that we're concerned about it, is that necessarily conflict of interest, or is it just things that have a financial impact?
You want me to handle that?
We got that one.
Okay, yeah, so we have what's called an actual conflict of interest and a perceived conflict of interest, right? Those are delineated in ORS 192, or actually it's ORS 244, the ethics laws. But when you think of an actual conflict of interest, think about, for example, if you owned a McDonald's here, or you wanted to build a McDonald's, right? You're a franchisee and you're on the planning commission, and that comes before the planning commission for a vote. Like, obviously, that's an actual conflict of interest. Yeah, you absolutely cannot vote on it. If it's your friend that owns the McDonald's and is trying to develop that, and that comes before planning commission, unless you're getting some kind of monetary benefit from that, then it's not an actual conflict of interest. What it is, however, perceived, and it's legitimate. So what you have to do is you have to get on record and say, this is the situation, this is what I have. I'm either going to voluntarily recuse myself, or on the record, I'm going to say that I think I can vote on this in a non-biased and objective manner. And here's why. So really what you're doing is you're it's for the record, but it's also for the public, right? For our confidence to say, hey, community, this is what is going on. I think I can still be fair and impartial. And so if citizens don't like that, right? You absolutely say, is there anybody in the audience that should say, sir, anybody in the audience that has an objection to that, they can make their objection to the record. Ultimately, if there's an appeal, Luba can look at that and they can say, maybe there's some fire here with smoke here, and validate that. And generally, I lean towards, unless it's absolutely necessary for you to vote on something, like to get to where the commission needs to get to, it's wise to recuse yourself when you need to recuse yourself. So that's a really big one. It's saying there's a couple of different conflicts. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I think I know the answer to this, but a lot of the applicants, reps that come before the commission, I deal with in my day job. And sometimes have very contentious relationships with them.
Yeah.
Before we vote, let's say we've got a project coming before us, certain ladies attorneys representing. We also have a case in my day job where we're fighting against. Do I need to say, like, I have a relationship with, do I need to disclose it, or can I just assume that I'm impartial?
It's prudent to disclose that, and I'll give you an example. So I was several years ago, I was a planning commissioner for the state of Canby. And I had before I was in local government, I had a private practice in Canby, and I would represent one people. And then they would end up in front of the planning commission, one separate matters, right? And so it was always awkward, but I had to say, after I talked to my former client, hey, look, I've got to put this on the record. And I always put it on the record because it's always better. Like, we want transparency in our government. So it's always better to be more transparent if you can. So I would say we always lean towards disclosure.
What should on ex parte, because this comes up on occasion, we all live in Sherwood and going past the site or. Do we have to disclose if we made a site visit?
Yeah, I would, it's.
Or
it's-
driven past it every day for 25 years?
So I'm asking you to do that, and here's why. I'm asking you to do it because when it comes down, like, that's an argument that an appellant at Luba could use, right, to help invalidate the proceedings, and it makes my life a lot easier, or whoever our outside counsel's life a lot easier if we can counter that with, we disclose literally everything on the record, right? There's nothing that we're not hiding the ball here. We talk about it in open session, so it's just as important for protecting the decisions that you guys make from that perspective as it is complying with that. Makes sense.
So as these high visibility projects come by, all commissioners just stay very familiar with, familiar with the location of the site.
Doesn't, yeah, familiar with the location of the site. It doesn't impact my ability to be fair and objective.
Okay,
We used to do that and we stopped doing that. Now we're doing it again.
yeah, that's why I didn't see that.
Good idea.
Write it on the little thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, we can put it on script.
Communication. Just
Okay.
driving by the site, how is that a communication?
Well,
Communication.
because I went to the site and I saw something that you didn't see, and it's gonna impact
Yeah, but
my ability.
disclosing ex parte communications I've had.
maybe it's not a communication, right? Maybe it's just a perceived, I perceived this and this is what I think about it based on my driving by the site. Like, I mean, a lot of times when a planning commission makes an otherwise really concrete decision, you know, lawyers look for anything they can to try and undermine that, right? And so I think the more we can shore up what your decisions were, because that's what our job as a city is support the planning commission's decision, you know, giving the city council a voice. So I think we want to create that record. That's what's really important.
I hesitate to ask this, but I'll ask it. In terms of social media, I think it's unlikely. I don't think it's happened here, but maybe probably since the Walmart went in. But if there's a lot of, let's say we're doing continuances, I'm thinking quasi judicial contentious application, we're doing continuances, so it's kind of on, you know, in the public world for multiple weeks or months. People started commenting online. Sherwood's very active with social media, so if the commissioners start reading stuff about a project, you know, basically, you know, the public doesn't like it, do they need to disclose that they've been reading about it on social media?
I mean, probably not, right? I guess it just depends on what the actual facts of the situation are. That, yeah, good practice, sure, disclose it. Just, hey, I saw some stuff on social media about this. I don't think it affects my ability to be fair and impartial, right? Like, that's not gonna hurt to say. But that's getting, not that I think it's a bad question. I just think that's really getting into the a little more of the fine. There's a lot of gray area here, obviously.
Oh, there's a lot of.
The same
there's
as
a
we went through
lot of-
Walmart, there was a lot of.
So I'm so glad I don't do social media.
Yeah, I know, I don't either, so it's like. I read it in the newspaper.
So I want to. A scenario going back earlier to conflicts of interest. So Sherwood West comes before us at some point. According to the most recent plan, 2 parks would be right next to my place, which would be a big financial benefit for me because I think the value of my home. I think I'd see an increase from that. Would that be something I should disclose or?
Well, I think you're speculating about that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I don't think there's an actual conflict.
Okay.
That would be, you know, I think let's have you and I have a conversation about that when it happens and let's examine it a little bit closer. But for right now, no, I mean, I think it's a perceived conflict of interest. I think you should absolutely identify it on the record. And when that time comes, I mean, sooner than this, we can all address any questions you have a little bit further. And I will tell you this is what's really scary about the Oregon Government Ethics Commission is that just about any other area, you can use your attorney as a safe harbor and say, I relied on legal advice. With the Oregon Government Ethics Commission, there's no safe harbor provision for attorney advice. It's on you to make the decision. I'm happy to help guide you through it, point you to the right statutes, but it's a kind of scary proposition for a lot of people. Like, you're telling me an attorney told me I could do this and I did it and now I'm in trouble, right? So that being a public official, you're trusted to read the law and make decisions for yourself.
So that's what you probably also say you lean on the side of accusing yourself
Yes.
or whatever, just to make sure that.
Transparency, right? That's what we want.
Well, the next slide is just Ryan and I's contact information for if you guys have any other questions or concerns that come up. We're always happy to chat. And I believe Ryan's email is on the handout you guys got. as well.
Yep. So we made you a little cheat sheet with all this information so you can study at home.
Yeah, we're always available.
When's the test? Next April.
Seriously, if you guys ever have questions, send us an email.
Yes.
Happy to talk, happy to chat.
Thanks, Emma.
All right, any other questions? Good.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Emma. Great job.
Great job.
All right.
Would it be a good idea for him to stick around for the beginning of the next topic? So we hear the update on the city with lawsuit and stuff? Is that good? Okay.
We're not, are we a part of that lawsuit, or I think the other cities are leading that? We're a part. Oh, we are.
We are a part.
Oh, he's already gone.
Yeah, we can get an update for you.
Yeah, okay.
He's done.
He's recused himself.
All right. I was gonna say, Joyce, it's not 10 o'clock.
I know, I am. I'm so happy.
Why don't we just?
Ryan, can you just give a quick update?
Yeah. Do you have any update on the?
Yeah, so there's a lot of this because we're live. Some of this is privileged, so I'm not gonna go into all of it. I'll give you an update on where we're at in the process. So basically, we are waiting for the Court of Appeals to make a decision, which already been oral argument. All the parties have done their briefing. The Court of Appeals decided to expedite this case, and so a lot of times, you know, when you file a brief in the Court of Appeals, you will argue at oral argument, it can take, because Oregon is so backlogged, it can take 2 to 3 years to get the decision back. Right? So the Court of Appeals expedited that. Unfortunately, in our Oregon Rules of Appellate Procedure, there's no clear answer on like timeline of what that means. So we're waiting for the Court of Appeals to make that decision. I would anticipate, you know, we argued this, our outside counsel argued this July 12th, I believe. I would be surprised if we don't have something in February, by February, but I can't promise. So when we do have that, I'm obviously we'll send it out to counsel. Eric can send that decision out to you. I'd be shocked if there's not a written opinion about it. But that's where it's at. Is there any specific questions that might be?
When you say argued this, can you clarify what exactly we argued? What is our case?
Yeah, so good question. Basically, the argument was that the governor acted outside of her statutory capacity to direct the agency to make the decisions that they make, right? So as you probably all know, agencies in Oregon, administrative agencies are purely a creature of statute. That means that they're created by the legislature and inherently they only have the authority that the legislature gives them. So they're separated from the executive branch. The executive branch can't override the legislature and say, agency, you will do this if it's outside the authority that the legislature granted them. So the argument is the rules that were made fell outside of that authority, and that's what the court's considering right now. Yeah. Anything else?
They're being appealed depending on how that ruled.
Somebody's gonna appeal it one way or
So
another.
it's gonna go to the Supreme Court, state Supreme Court.
If we win, I'm sure the state would appeal that. There's not a lot of case law out there right now on that. So it's an interesting case to say the least, but I'm almost certain that it will be appealed either way.
And this is Oregon Supreme Court.
Next is Oregon Supreme Court, yeah.
This is all within Oregon law. That's what we're arguing.
Oregon administrative law, no federal stuff that I know of. Yeah.
There are components in here that, you know, like no parking requirements for disabled. I mean, how does that even comply with ADA stuff? I mean, there's all kinds of, I would think, other approaches as well.
Yeah,
Look at that.
I don't necessarily think that that's an accurate statement. I'm not sure. So the way that we structure these arguments is there's a conglomeration of cities that got together and hired a firm to look into it and make the best arguments that we can make. And so I'm not actually involved in writing the briefs or arguing it, but I've read them and I've listened to the oral argument. So that's the direction I would give is, you know, really the question at issue for the court is whether or not the legislature delegated by the court. So it gets in unknown areas like this, we'll see where it pans out, because it's important case law no matter what happens. Yes.
So we're operating as if it's required, because technically until it's appealed, it's required. Is that true?
Yeah, and I'll let Erica, do you wanna, Erica, Joy, I guess, do you wanna address some of that? I mean, that was where I think that the city landed.
Yes, that is where the city landed, is that we are administering or requiring all the clear and objective standards that are in CPEC. We're administering those.
Right, and I guess, but it goes back to like, we're not gonna be requiring parking. And is there anything that we can put in our legislative thing that says, in light of CPEC regulations in place at this time, this law, this requirement is here until such time the appeal
Yes.
comes out, and then we can rescind every single one of these things
I'll
on
let
appeal.
Eric address that, but what I should have said at first is one of the nuances I left out of this is that the cities in this case, we moved for a stay of this law and the court denied that stay, right? And let it remain in place pending the litigation. However, that's when the court said, we understand that this is an important issue and we're gonna expedite the so take from that what you will. I don't know what to make of it. So
So because the court denied the stay, we're required to proceed with the governor's executive orders with CPEC.
Yeah.
and
Right.
Administrative rules, and we're allowed to put asterisks on every one of these that said, subject to appeal, this will be reversed.
Well, yeah, I think that's a fairly accurate statement. I think the concern is the fairness process of this, right? Like if we're making some people do this, then it gets overturned, what do we do with it?
Right, because there's some of the requirements are in place now.
Right.
As in parking reform A, and then some we requested for a 1-year extension, which was granted by DLCD. So that's what we're codifying. We're actually codifying both to make sure that we're in compliance, but we're implementing things now that are mandated, like the frequent transit, line 94 is there's a whole bubble around it within a half a mile. We have to, by state law, implement it now. So the threshold in regards to moving the goalposts gets really complicated with land use, because it's like, well, at what point in time did you actually submit the application? What were the laws in place at that time?
Yeah.
But ultimately, the new stuff that we're trying to codify, it won't be in effect until June 30th or July 1st of 2024. In regards to officially in our code.
But staff's already implementing, that's my
Well,
problem. is
we're
already
implementing
The clear
some.
objective without
Yes.
having gone through
By
a
state
public
law.
hearing process or putting it in our code.
Yeah.
As required by state law,
As required.
as required by state law,
Right.
We
right?
can't
Yeah.
not not
Exactly.
implement it in any other way.
Yeah, and really if we did something, in my opinion, I think it's different than the course we're taking, risk some legal action by the state,
Right, and that's what we don't want to get caught up in.
Right, but I'm okay with thinking about,
Sure.
okay, so now the law of the land says we don't have any parking requirements within this bubble.
Right.
And the case ends in our favor. And we now, in my opinion, would rescind the bubble, because that is, in my opinion, harmful to the quality of life for the citizens of Sherwood by implementing this thing. So are we able to do that without going again through the entire hearings process by putting something in place now that says we're implementing this based on this requirement and it sunsets if this happens?
Yeah, I think you could do that.
Yeah, I think so too. And we brought
And
this
then-
up.
Yeah, and
That was already also council requested it be
And I-
some type of sunset.
I'm not an attorney either, but I assume very similar to the way that we're acting right now, where we don't have it codified, but we're implementing. As soon as that law comes down, as soon as the ruling comes down in our favor, that's the law then, right? Unless the judge orders,
Yeah, pending,
so we got to pay attention
Petition to
to
review
the
from the
to the
ordinance.
nuances of an appeal, but. If it's no longer law, then it's no longer law, we wouldn't implement it, even if it's in the code.
Right, but a land use application that submitted it before that
That's
decision,
where it gets really.
we're really
Yeah, you
at the
found that.
time of what was in place at the time that they
Yeah.
submit,
And also the.
because you can't just change it up.
And we've already approved one development, the Chevron, with one less parking stall than was required by the code due to CFAC. And so that's an interesting question too, is how do we deal with those? I assume they'll just be non-conforming, legal non-conforming, as if the code goes back and now requires that additional stall, then they're non-conforming. So maybe it's something that we probably need to add.
Well, and now the city's been damaged. Can we go after the state?
Property owner, the property owner has been damaged potentially.
Maybe the property owner can, the city was.
We should probably add to.
Okay,
We can add some language and just like, hey, if you like to this one here, we'll get into it, but we have this like recommended parking standard. And we could add to this like, hey, if you do reduce parking and then the law goes in, our favor, then you're non-conforming.
yeah, I mean, as with any changes to the law after development happens.
Right.
They end up being non-conforming
Right.
if they don't meet the existing
Right.
requirements.
You ever thought
That's
of that?
just an automatic.
No, I mean, I think putting it in the code as you've done is great. I mean, I think it makes sense. But if there's a concern of like teeing people up to know that that could be sunset, is there an avenue through like a temporary rule versus code? No, I just think so.
I don't
I
know.
mean.
I don't think so.
What we do with admin rules and.
I mean, I need to,
But
that's a good point. I just, I don't want to answer off the cuff because I want to think through that a little bit. and have some conversation. It's a great idea.
What was that? How did you describe
it
it?
would be like a temporary rule, a temporary admin rule that says like, for this period, you don't have to provide parking. And then you could kind of time the admin rule to be, until such time as it's. But you maybe would already have code teed up too, in case you don't, are successful.
Yeah.
But then it doesn't mean, then you don't have to go through necessarily, I would think, potentially the process of removing something from your code, because that's a public process, and then I don't think we're gonna get a slew of asks to do a lot fewer parking, but development community could come out and fight against it and say,
They're
you
definitely.
guys have been applying it for a year and a half and there's nothing detrimental. Why are you taking it?
Right, well, for sure, within the ordinance, there would be some type of identification in regards or a clause that says, if we happen to win the litigation. We're gonna remand all of these.
Okay.
Yeah.
Standards.
That would be in the ordinance.
So then it's
itself.
already in the standard so that it doesn't go through the entire process again, because,
When is this scheduled
Okay,
to get in
that's
front of
good.
council? I don't.
Not until late next spring.
So
so-
we'll
Yeah.
probably have an answer.
Yeah.
I mean, fingers crossed, we'll have an answer
Yeah.
beforehand.
But on appeal, it could be another.
Yeah, in this, the Oregon Supreme Court, they're fairly selective about when you file in the Oregon Supreme Court, it's called a petition for review, and it's really unlikely. It's a long shot to get the court to accept your case. So if the court does not accept any appeal of this, then it becomes law.
Right, and I think that's the other important piece to keep in mind is that some of this is clear and objective, we're applying that straight out, but some of it is discretionary in terms of how we comply. And we want to retain that ability for you guys and the city to choose our own destiny within CFAC. If we do nothing, we just kind of don't play ball, and that's kind of the decision of playing ball, because I think we're required to by law, but also we're choosing our own destiny within CFAC. So if we just do nothing,
it's
The
an
state-
automatic
the state-
remand.
trust me,
Yeah.
the state there is law that will just be applied straight out, and we
It
do
is.
not want any of that. It's
Where we
basically.
wouldn't require
It's no
parking,
parking
period.
citywide. It's no parking citywide. It's basically.
Requirements.
And so we just don't play ball and update our code and do the mapping and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then the state will say, okay, that's fine. And a developer comes in and they are subject to no parking.
It's the same thing HB 2001 had, right, with just the default admin rules would apply.
Right, exactly.
Mhm.
And we
Right,
don't
but
want
I'm liking exploring the temporary rules, because right now, to me, it's a little nebulous that. Staff has some clear and objective standards that they're already applying that aren't codified, they're just. On a sheet of paper that we're looking at as we go through it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd push back a little bit against that because I do think right now it's good law. Until the Oregon Court of Appeals says otherwise.
Right.
But with that being said, I mean, I see where you're coming from, and I think we should have a further conversation about the temporary rules on that. I mean, and again, it may turn into we don't need to have that conversation because we already have a decision, but it doesn't hurt to think in that direction and see what we can, the boundaries we can push.
Reach out to the cities as well. We have somewhat standing meeting with all the cities and counties that are part of the lawsuit, and we kind of strategize about stuff, so it might be good to run that by.
Are legislators involved in that at all? Do they even seem to care? They were totally circumvented. I mean, there isn't a single sitting elected official that had anything to do with this anymore. It's all state bureaucracy now. Kay Brown's gone.
There was somewhat, I don't know if it passed in the last session, there was some legislation to, regarding CFAC about like, it's like updating the administrative rules that they set. I don't know if it passed or not.
There's some concern, right? Because you guys know the principle of home rule, right? Like there's some concern because over the last several decades, I mean, that's been significantly abrogated. And cities are very concerned about that. So I think the more we talk to our legislatures and get a legislative fix on what's in the interest of the citizens of Sherwood, it's important. And I know council's taken a very active role in that. The mayor's done a very good job of reaching out to our legislatures, and I think we're going to continue that. So, obviously, the last ditch effort should be in court. We really should be involved in the process of this thing as it happens. And really that's what our litigation's about right now, is there wasn't the opportunity for the public to be involved in these rules, right? It was maybe some comment, but ultimately it was a governor saying, agency, you will do this. And the argument is that there wasn't the legislative authority for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Call me anytime.
All right, thank you, Ryan. All right, I just have a couple of slides, and I think the goal for tonight, since you guys are acting as the Citizen Advisory Committee for this work, is we'll just go through the slides and then dig into the actual amendments. I think that's the easiest way of moving forward in regards to tackling this. So as you're aware, Ryan gave you the history as far as how we got here. There's definitely parking reform A, where all applications submitted on or after December 31st of 2022. We can only do these that we're implementing now, as mandated by the OAR. 1 parking space per unit in residential developments. And so in the matrix, I provided what we actually changed, or if it's been already codified, that no amendments are required, and what OAR, and what code section had to be modified. And then as far as we can't require parking for small units, affordable units, childcare facilities for people with disabilities and shelters. And we're already applying that as is, that is already codified. So we don't really have to make any changes related to that. The big one is the parking reform B.
Sorry, just
Yes.
codify meaning that's already in city code, right?
Yes. Yep. So parking reform B, this is the one that we received 1-year extensions to. And so a lot of it's really what triggered a lot of the changes that we have in front of us as far as the amendments, preferential placement of carpool and van pool. I think that's already in the code. But the 1/2 acre in size as far as new parking lots, that's all new. So there's new things required as far as 40% tree canopy, solar, things like that. And then the thing too, as far as on the second paragraph there, carports and garages may not be required for residential development. So, a developer can come in without a garage or a carport, because we don't the law says we can't require them. And the big change for us is now garage parking spaces counted as a parking space. Before, we never counted them as a parking space. So that's a major difference. Yeah, and then the other is that required parking may be provided off-site up to 2,000 feet pedestrian travel. Before, the standard was 500 feet, now 2,000 feet is a very long distance that parking could be provided off-site. And then there's other reducing parking mandates if they're providing solar panel, sustainable aspects of, within the provisions. Let's see, the other big thing is EV conduits. So the good thing is they don't have to actually install the chargers, but they have to put down the piping. So the conduit, so that if and when they want to install the actual meters and whatnot, the piping is there for them to do it. And this is again for multifamily. So any units 4 or 5 units or more. So that's different. And then finally, this was the one where, we thought that we weren't subject to this just because TriMet had a different definition of frequent transit versus the OAR. And we've basically been notified by DLCD, this actually does apply to us, and line 94 is very specific to that. So this is the current map that is available online that basically identifies the half-a-mile distance on both sides of line 94. Again, the city is currently utilizing the straight line method as far as measuring distance, but I do know that there is, we're doing an analysis as far as a walking buffer analysis. So that may reduce the impacted properties.
And we have an option under the. rules.
Yes,
Do you
we
want
do
to
have an
do that?
option.
Yeah,
Does the walking buffer have to be like, do you have to have infrastructure that affords like ADA walking?
I don't know if it gets that specific in the
Alright.
rule language.
I don't know at all, it just popped in my head like.
yeah, because I mean, without this, I guess the buffer aspect is really easy that it's already built in versus us doing a true study and identifying, measuring, so hopefully it'll reduce it so that this map will get updated based on, we're having Hugo, our social planner, do this buffer. And so hopefully we'll see some type of reduction.
And what happens if line 94 changes?
So there are new rules right now that are in draft form where that was the question as far as, transit lines change all the time. And basically it says, the update says that the line has to be accepted at a minimum for 1 year. So once, if it changes in a year's time, we would update the map to reflect that. But the new rule, again, it says draft staff report, is the draft amendments, but they indicated that this map would need to be valid for a minimum of 1 year. At least that's what the proposed rule change says.
Right, so TriMet changes the route, it has to be changed for 1 year.
Right, it has to be
In place for a year.
Before we can update our map.
Right, right. So at least that was the only thing that I saw as far as the latest amendments that are being proposed.
What's the headway that is considered frequent service by OAR? What's the frequency?
I think one per 30 minutes.
30 minutes, I think.
Yeah,
There was something where it was off and they made an exception for this route, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
well, no, 90, so
the
97.
Second route.
97 is also frequent, but it's only in the morning and in the afternoon.
Mhm.
And I said, hey, DLCD, are you guys also counting this? Because as far as frequency, it is morning and they go, well, we're gonna make an exception and we'll only count line 94 since it's an all day. It's like, okay.
So just to be clear, the state is saying if there is a bus line that runs every 30 minutes in your city, whatever city it is, you cannot require parking within a half mile.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, kind of a big extreme question. Can we eject TriMet from the city? Or do they have a right to their bus transit service in our city?
Well, that's, TriMet's our regional
I
transit.
mean, I'm not necessarily opposed, but this is what this is doing. TriMet does not go throughout our city.
Oh, I know.
It goes into and out
We're
of.
supposed to walk.
So we have no.
No, I know, it's the opposite side of Highway 99 is no parking. I mean, and there's no way to get around. I mean.
Well, what it means is developments here, the people who might like live there would have no way of actually exploring or getting through within Sherwood. They're gonna be, this construct has them come in and out
Right.
of Sherwood.
Right.
So,
So there's no means for them to get around with no ability to park. So it's like, I'm not necessarily opposed to having TriMet, but if that's what it's gonna mean, like, we need to consider options here. That's really hurting our city that way.
as in eliminating TriMet within the city of Sherwood? Is that what you're
That,
asking?
I'm asking kind of an extreme approach. to that,
Okay,
yes.
I mean, definitely then he's, just like there was a question, can we get out of Metro?
Well, there you go.
I mean, it's like,
Yeah, I'm
once
just
you're in,
curious,
you're in.
in this area, if they're not allowed to have a car, basically, which is what the state's trying to get at, that's what they're trying to do. They're not willing to legislate, get rid of
This
cars.
this isn't retro, this is just for the new buildings, and I was wondering, the new activity. It's
that's-
and so I'm wondering how much is that, if I remember right, it's not allowed developable land
Right,
in this area even to
No.
begin with. Now, obviously, if someone was to tear something down and rebuild, these would apply, but the impact. It's the threat of the law, which is greater than the reality of the law, I think.
no, I don't have it on.
Yeah, it's a good way to say it.
No, there's about, I think there's like less than 10.
I think we showed that map to you at our last work
Yeah,
session.
like 10 developable lands, and a lot of it was like in vegetative or wetland areas, so it wasn't as significant as what this map looks like as far as developable, unless someone tears something down, then,
And
The
redevelop.
hearing, can you note vacant lands?
yeah,
That'll,
For sure,
that'll help
yeah.
the conversation.
Yeah. well,
If we know that there's, because I see big squares that don't look like they have a lot of houses on it. Does that mean that there's something there that's not going to be developed or?
And most that's institutional, isn't it?
Schools, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, for example, like when you look at it, it's like you said, the threat of the law.
We will definitely provide you that.
yeah,
But if
for
we just
sure,
Say, these are the undeveloped residential parcels.
yeah, it's
Or
just a
commercial.
handful, yeah, it's just a handful.
But we're also proposing a giant UGB expansion as well. Now, I know this doesn't necessarily reach over there, but if
But the
they.
TriMet goes over there, so where's that planning for within 25,000 new residencies? When's TriMet gonna do that? How can that get impacted?
Yeah.
So what's the order of operations there?
Right, but if
Has to
there,
be there for a year.
right, but if TriMet isn't there,
Yeah,
then
so
we're
we'll
looking
have
at
an
more
opportunity to develop
car.
any
Okay,
of the Sherwood West prior to any. You would expect. that
Yeah.
A lot of development would occur before TriMet would see reason to put a bus route over there.
right, so definitely, since you guys are our tag. I'll bring back as far as the map in regards to the developable lands, but also if there's any revision. In regards to this transit because of the buffer, we'll bring it back to you guys so that you guys are fully aware as far as what's happening. Oh, so this is the best part. Thank you. I think it's the best part. It's providing information to the general public and with Erica and Emily, they really put this webpage together. It provides the general public as far as a place to land to answer some of these questions. There's an attachments with a CFAC FAQ, the frequent our existing or current frequent transit corridor map, and also as you guys have requested before, a recommended parking standards, which are basically our existing parking standards.
Right,
So,
I like that.
so, we've already had an inquiry, just because you guys know, you guys did the zone change for the multifamily off of Langer Drive. So they're gonna be thinking about coming in officially for a multifamily development. So there was a lot of question because they are in that map of frequent transit.
Oh, yeah.
So what I did say is, well, legally, we can't require you to provide parking. It would not be smart as a developer or a multifamily to not have parking. And I said, here are the recommended parking requirements, but also heads up, you have to do 40% conduits because you're also multifamily. And so they're absorbing all of that and how they can fit in.
So there's no parking, okay, I just equated that, there's no parking requirement, so how does that impact? What do we do for the business? We can't protect the businesses that are surrounding there because all the residents are gonna go park in the Ross.
They would have to enforce
If
private-
there's no parking.
Right, if
Right.
there's no park, if we
Right,
don't require, it,
and-
they don't put adequate parking or enough parking, then it's going to bleed over into our commercial.
Right, and of course, my next slide is gonna start talking about unbundling parking as far as commercial developments too.
Okay, well, let's go
So
there.
I'm just,
Sounds
I mean,
exciting.
the,
Bundling.
so I wanna talk about next steps because I haven't gotten there as far as the unbundling.
Oh.
It's baby steps and baby steps.
We did the code amendments for parking A and B, which are in your packet, and then
Yes.
the next steps.
The next steps are gonna be the fair pricing options that council decided on.
Right,
In regards to the programming of the unbundling parking for the least commercial developments. And then creating the tax revenue for commercial parking lots, which we're fortunate that we don't currently have any here. But we will have it set up similar to the lodging tax in the same code section, not in Title 16.
right.
So we've already started that conversation, but we're taking baby steps in regards to code amendments first, and then these are gonna be the next two that we're gonna tackle. Again, we're gonna continue tracking all of these CFAC changes. We regularly get amendments, and so I'm constantly reading to see how it's impacting what we're implementing. Just like that whole 1 year rule about what if the traffic line changes? And then, of course, oh, look, someone's, sorry. My phone is talking to me. As you already heard, Ryan gave you an update in regards to the CFAC litigation. So yeah, that is all I have in regards to slides, but we can dig in if you'd like, or I can answer any questions you guys have before we dig in. Yes.
Do you know of any examples where a developer has used these rules at this point to have no parking or to maximize what this allows them?
We
In the outer metro?
well, not here in Sherwood,
Well, Chevron did one reduction on.
just one reduction.
But they still provided, but do we know of it, like any surrounding cities where they've developed, just like, we're not gonna do any because we fall within
No,
this?
Portland,
I
maybe?
mean, I can tell you that from a Portland's perspective, the number of applications that are coming in with parking when it's not required is much higher than we thought, when anticipated. So developers are recognizing what their bottom line is and what they can sell and market. And so oftentimes we're in conversations of, well, you're not meeting, you're buffering or you're not preserving these trees and you're providing a bunch of parking, you don't have to. And so we're getting to that conversation and they're saying, yeah, but I can't sell this here without the parking.
Exactly.
Right.
And
So I think that's what goes back to the threat versus the reality.
Right.
I could be 100% wrong, but I think that a lot of people that come to Sherwood for the market that is Sherwood know there's a certain expectation, certainly in residential, I don't think you're gonna see a whole.
Right, and it's my understanding as far as the multifamily application that's gonna be coming in, they are gonna provide parking. I just don't know, just because we're not requiring any, it doesn't, because I, forewarned them, it doesn't make sense in a business perspective for a multifamily to not have any parking.
Well, that's true, and that may be true, and it's kind of anecdotal at this point. Why would cities even have minimum parking standards to begin with? that says something that we would even have parking standards to begin with, that we think that there's a chance that they wouldn't, a reasonable chance. Most cities do have parking standards for that reason.
Oh.
Right. I mean, the apartments next door, they don't have enough parking, so they park in the city hall parking lot.
Yeah.
Because we don't have, because Old Town parking standards are reduced.
In my opinion, it's just my opinion, but I think there's probably a history of both. There's a history of cities requiring too much parking. And that's where this push partly comes from, and it's getting tied into the climate discussion. But I think you take the climate issue out, I think there's still in a lot of people's minds, professionals, planners' minds, and others, that local codes require too much parking. And you can see it around, right? There's ample park even on Black Friday, there's ample parking within a shopping center. At the same time, I think there are also developments, and it's usually site specific, in my opinion, where they're constrained for some reason. And so a reduction, less parking kind of gets them where they want to go. And the parking might be an issue, but they're okay. I think this one is a good example where he probably needed it to pencil or wanted to hit a number. And so you got the units in, and on this particular development, it's 65. It's reduced to 65% of the actual standard for Old Town. And so he got in under the very traditional code because he's in Old Town, but we know there's parking problem there. And my guess is that it helped make the project pencil. So I really think the code goes both ways. Sometimes we require way too much, to be completely honest, and sometimes if there's no requirement or less requirement, it's not enough. But that's all anecdotal. I think, if we really got into it, we'd probably do a survey around town and say, how much are the parking lots actually used? What's the percentage of occupancy for all of our stalls? And I think for commercial, we're going to be okay. For multifamily, it would probably be pretty tight. For the multifamily and condos would be my guess.
Is there anything being done here about that issue of residents parking?
Oh, yeah, we've been enforcing it. Yeah.
Okay.
We didn't notice and then we started enforcing.
Okay.
So
Like, is there anything where parking lot is reserved just for like city hall or library use? Like, can residents use it like for a certain number of time, or?
There's new signage that basically says that it's for city hall use only.
Only, okay,
Yeah.
okay, good.
So does anybody have, I was gonna just move right on to does anybody have any code? Do we need to go through everything on the code? I found one typo, but I didn't.
Yes,
Typo.
yeah, so let's,
I don't know if anybody had any other comments or changes on any of it, but just page 19 is,
page 19 of the packet.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
On a lot or parcel, right, E,
Okay.
it's 1/2 is on half.
Oh, yep. Oh, on half, thank you.
Right.
It didn't spell check for me. It was right.
All right, Teresa?
I just had a question on packet page 19. Where we say garages, you added new language, garages and carports are not required for residential developments. Do you have to say it?
The only, so why, because it was under the OAR. I know, so that's the only reason, I mean, it was very clear that it was a line item. Yeah, and that's why,
Kind of like highlighting to developers of like, do you want to save some money? Don't build a garage. But I mean, couldn't you just say you have to provide one space per unit and be done with it? I don't know.
We tell them what they need, not what they don't
Don't have to do,
There you go.
exactly.
Yeah.
We'll look into that.
So let
We'll look into that nice little silent.
yeah, let me ponder, but also see how other jurisdictions have applied it.
Mhm.
Let's review.
And then,
Is it necessary?
yeah,
Okay.
The next one says if they're proposed.
yeah.
It says that they're,
So yeah, I think you could keep C.
and it just says that they're optional if they're proposed.
Mhm.
There you go.
Okay.
We'll look into it.
Yeah, let's reevaluate.
And then the same page at the very end under C. Adequate parking for truck loading should be considered. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's an odd word to have in a code, you know.
right, so. All of the summaries that they provided us, are not the same. I mean, the intent of the summary of the regulation is in the summary. So what I did was I literally took the OAR and plopped it in the matrix and then transferred it because we've gotten where, especially with the middle housing, like one conversation was cottage cluster, we were putting in a number, but the OAR said it had to have been a buildable footprint of 900 or at least, or maximum of 900 square feet. So we literally just took what was in the OAR and popped it because our language was more, not wishy-washy, but it was different. And so my approach this time around, let's take the OAR and just plop it down. Right, but again, they called it out. That's the reason why it's like, okay, if they called it out, I need to put it someplace. Where should I put it? You know, where in the code that I'm familiar with. That's why there's like cross references in a different section to make sure we're capturing where we're identifying it, because it's not as a planner.
Are written for us to comply with, or as example code for us to use
No, it's not a model code. It's,
There you go.
it's the rule. It's the rule.
for the city. The right code to comply with.
Yes.
There you go. So I think. Makes sense to me what you said.
Should be must considered or removed.
I just don't know how if I was an implementer, I don't know how I would ever apply C. Like, it would be meaningless to me because you should consider it, but if you don't want to, you don't have to, and I'm not gonna fight it, so.
So C as in 3C?
As in.
The last clause, the
Yeah.
emergency vehicle must be retained and adequate parking should be considered.
Oh, I see. Should, the word should.
Yeah, it's the word should.
Yeah, and I took the language straight out. Okay, well,
Maybe think about it.
evaluate.
Well, we do have, it's an interesting question, because we do have in our site planning code, we have requirements for loading, unloading. If it's, and I don't remember the details now, but if it's over a certain size, actually, I think all commercial has to have loading, unloading. So, and I don't expect you to know the answer to this, but does the CFEC rules for parking also apply to loading and unloading? You know that?
I'm sorry, you said,
Does CFEC, like when we say no parking with an outlet, does that also apply?
oh no, I think it excludes, I think you still can require on-site loading.
Okay.
So, and this particular language is in CFAC.
Right, and so I guess my point
But those
is, we already have code that very specifically addresses truck loading and unloading. And so I think we should remove it and just lean on, and, because it's required. So we just delete that last part of the sentence, and then our site plan code requires it. I think it's 250 feet for certain buildings, and then 500 square feet for other buildings, and then 750 for larger buildings.
Okay, well, we'll reevaluate, right,
Yeah.
because I don't want to just eliminate and make sure that the existing code, the intent is the same and meeting, and that's the goal, because it doesn't make sense for us to duplicate, and that's why there are some things that's like, I'm not codifying that because it's already in. Okay, evaluate if needed.
What did we decide up above and under E for B? Are we,
We're gonna review.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna review if it's necessary.
Yeah.
And, you know, we'll also probably talk to our partners too, as far as similar cities within our size, probably definitely in Washington County, just because Portland's so unique. And see how they're implementing to see if they're silent just because it's a, you know, it's a given, but we'll find out.
Comments? Questions?
I had a question on page 20, let's see, number 7, where it says conversion and redevelopment of underutilized parking areas for other uses is allowed. Is that allowed anytime they want to do that now that this is in place?
Yes. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So anybody with any developed area right now can go and take away any parking.
yeah, any underutilized parking areas, yeah.
Who determines if it's underutilized?
Had this conversation.
Sorry.
No,
No,
That's
not
okay.
here.
Not here, but we've had, it's like, who makes that determination? Is it staff?
Yeah, we're still kind of like,
Parking, make them do a parking study.
yeah.
Yeah, most, but it's kind of, the parking study then makes it really difficult when the new rules doesn't mandate parking.
Well, isn't it
So-
just like, I mean, the way I would see that is just if you're over parked right now, based on the new CPAC regulations, then you can get down to whatever the new requirement is.
So let's just say the parking requirements right now are 0.
Yeah, then you can, you have,
Redevelop all of the parking spaces?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So.
something else.
Sherwood parking lot can be redeveloped to. Or Cole's parking lot. Cole. Well, I don't know.
That way. Doesn't that apply to like, even if, I mean, could the owner just say, well, this could be used for something else that I want it to be used
Yes.
for, and they
Yeah.
just decide.
They can, yeah, because that's what the whole aspect is like. There's a vision that there's just too much parking, and so let's reevaluate to see these underutilized parking spaces to do something else.
Yeah, but I don't think underutilized is the same as statute or code compliant. Right? If you were built with the required number of parking spaces for when you got built. And you want to redevelop that parking area, then I think you need to substantiate that it's
Yeah.
underutilized.
I
And
agree.
you just do a
study.
operational analysis at peak hours, that you guys could preload the scope. And if they can demonstrate that they're all vacant at that time, then it's underutilized, because I think that's a very good point. It's very like, it'd be a good moneymaker for someone to
Well,
say like,
that's what
yeah,
I'm
I'm gonna
thinking,
build something right here and nobody's using it, don't worry about it.
I want bike meters. For something. I'll think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we'll have to definitely,
Could they go below, let's say there is a parking minimum that applies, say it's whatever, it's not a 0 parking type of site plan, could they go below the code requirement with the study?
I wouldn't say so. I think underutilized
So
is a
then-
different term than like. Yeah, you see, that would be an adjustment or variance or whatever we call it to go under.
They couldn't go below it. But they also couldn't reduce it unless they demonstrated that it wasn't all needed.
Correct.
yeah,
Okay. You want to ask the SCD?
I made a note for sure. Yeah.
yeah,
I have
Yeah.
opinions, I don't know, for sure.
yeah, no, we'll email. Any other comments?
Can we control for certain things like solar powers and I don't see. Is maybe some of this what you're gonna implement later? We're gonna see code for later that was in your, so I did it
No, this is,
all in
pretty
your
much-
capacity.
this is everything that is mandated by us. We've tried to codify it as far as proposed.
So there's like components here where you can have solar or wind power and lieu of things. Can we write like design standards for those? So we don't have some giant windmill in the middle of a parking lot somewhere or something? I mean, is that, in other words, can we kind of add to and modify standards here a little bit? So yeah, you can have your solar thing, but maybe we express it, it's gotta have certain design standards, or you can't have parts sourced from an, OFAC designated country or something.
think a good example would be the Ancestry Brewing on 12th and Sherwood Road. And they have they're pretty cool. They're street lights. They have both little tiny windmills, probably less than
Yeah.
24 inches, and solar panels. But where's, those are cool. Those are neat. Someone puts up 12-foot blades, so I mean, is that what you're getting at? Is how do we regulate that?
Yes, because it doesn't say.
So we're looking at like packet on top of page 20. Where a new development of a 1/2 acre of new surface parking, they can provide. The following as far as installation of solar panels. Or comply with green energy technology. Or provide tree canopy converting or convert.
I think it's page 25.
It's both on page 20 and 25.
Okay,
Oh,
Yeah, because page 25 is the reduction in required parking spaces.
yeah, but
Wind
then.
power one's on 25.
And then the page 20 is talking about if they're gonna, any development that includes more than 1/2 acre of new surface parking. They need to provide one of those following. So,
Yeah, this, I think, we'll look into
design,
maybe possible
Thing
some
that
design
fits the
standards.
aesthetics of the city
The aesthetic, yeah,
and sound. Some of those wind, depending on how big they are, hopefully they're not that, hopefully they're like what you're suggesting. But
and noise, okay,
yeah,
okay.
there's other kind of peripherals that I thought of that probably aren't for tonight, but again, going back to tree code. There's more and more things require trees as a component. It's probably time to revisit. On some of that. It's also kind of made me wonder, I mean, with losing all this parking, should we revisit some of our design standards and setback rules and other stuff? Lot sizes. Street widths, I don't know if we can address those, no? I know this is all kind of peripheral, but it's related, I think.
Right, I mean, there's gonna definitely be the TSPs getting updated in regards to, there's gonna be new rules in regards to widths. As far as more skinny streets and things like that, so that's not even within my purview as far as what we're doing, but it is part of the CFEC umbrella because it's the transportation planning rule. So that's something else that's gonna be moving forward.
Lot sizes would provide more length down the street of parking across street if those are bigger too. I don't know.
Right,
I'm just thinking of
CFAX going skinny streets, so that there's no parking.
the what goes on the street.
CFAC is requiring narrower streets.
Yeah, so
There's gonna
I'm
be,
just throwing things out here. There's so many different regulations pushing stuff. It's hard
I
to.
mean, I hate to bring this up right now, but I will just to let you guys know kind of what's. Seems what we're tracking. There's another House Bill 3414. And it hasn't passed yet. It was proposed at the last legislative session. It failed by 1 vote and it's back this year, or next year, but that would allow a developer to get a variance to lot size, lot width, parking standards.
I know, you're right.
I honestly feel that way. It's really frustrating.
Yeah.
It's like, why are we
There's still
here?
breath in my body. We will not, yeah, 3414.
Why are we even?
All
why are we
cities.
even Here,
I have to
you
tell
know,
my.
why are there local planners? And so my point is that like,
Right, of course,
what's that?
just to make sure the code reads right.
I guess.
Somebody's got to proofread it.
I mean, I hate to even bring it up, because I think it's just like, there's just more coming is what I'm saying, and it could further prevent our ability to even do the things that you're talking about, Commissioner Vance, and trying to address these issues, is it's this, and then the next one that further pulls our ability to address the last issue that we feel state mandated, so that is likely coming in 2024.
Yay. Can we require that off-street, or what is that, not off-street, but the non-off-street, like street parking space to be designated for the lot that they're near? Can you do anything like that ever? Okay.
This is a public street.
Can we require that developments only occur within a certain distance from public parking facility or structures?
Say that again.
We require that certain developments we choose only are allowed within a certain distance of public parking infrastructure.
I mean, there's.
That's an interesting approach though for Sherwood
I-
West. Because you could put in a big, public parking garage. And then you could say, these types of uses are allowed within X amount of feet.
So that's.
Even if there was a private structure.
Or private structure, yeah.
It's very
You
specific,
don't have to, as long as you choose to build parking spaces.
right, but it's,
That's,
That'd be fine.
that's a really, really interesting
Yeah.
concept.
it's similar to transit oriented districts.
Mhm.
Where, along. Max. Lots of, their TODs, transit oriented district, they're high density apartments. That's the whole purpose for them, so that. The use is consistent where people should be taking the mass transit versus taking their cars.
It's like a Ranco in Hillsborough.
Yes. Yeah, so that's.
That might be one kind of last ditch way of making sure some of these areas have, at least some of these folks have a place to put their car. Even if it's private, I mean, that's consistent with your unbundled thing you're gonna get to, there would at least be available spaces nearby. And if we set it so there has to be so many available spaces and nearby, then. I don't know, like I said, I was writing down all kinds of out there, yeah.
Well, I think, Commissioner Vance, I think we welcome those ideas. I think,
Yeah.
Council is also looking for ways to, address some of the issues that we see coming as well. So if you guys have good ideas that we can actually implement and keep coming.
All these ones that the state has decided are kind of this subclass of people that apparently don't need cars, in the name of equity, naturally. So like your affordable housing people and domestic violence shelters, all this. Can we require developers to provide some form of transportation for these folks in some way? Or they're just out of luck, you don't get cars because you're not the right class?
You're disabled, so we're gonna take your
Yeah.
vehicle away from you.
Obviously, that's equity. You should know.
Walk. A certain amount of
It's
distance.
just making people walk a certain amount of distance.
Yeah, just. Even, I mean, one example, in the code. We, at another, my previous employer, we provided incentives in the code. So that the developers can take them, like affordability. No one took the incentives, and we added, you can increase density. So you can build more as long as they become affordable at a certain percentage affordable. It was driven by market, the market's driven it and no one took advantage of it.
But it might be something we could put like in our design elements. Where if you include a garage and you can reduce your setbacks on the side.
Parking requirements.
There you go.
Or
It's a good one, incentive if you mean.
If you meet what's
Incentives. I
on,
like
what's on
that.
our little sheet,
Sorry.
then you can, I don't know, do
You can
something.
get a 5% adjustment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is one.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're gonna get the automatic adjustments or variances anyway in a couple of years, so you might as well incentivize now.
Yeah.
Trying to get.
The disabled
Before we go
one.
Too far down the path, I want to be mindful of time. We have a whole other code to do, so we have.
That's fine.
No, you had more notes. I just want to make sure that we get them if they're related.
I had lots of crazy ideas, but I don't think.
I-
Most of them are- It's okay.
Next Tuesday's a city council meeting, you get your 3 minutes.
In my 3 minutes.
Hey, you get 4. Oh, get 4.
I think we covered the majority. I think we covered.
If you can send those to us,
Yeah,
that would be
send it to us.
great. So then we can actually start thinking about, as we're creating our work program. As far as, well, what things can we tackle and, or how should we approach this?
Sure.
That would be great, just because I'm not sure if I captured everything,
That's
but.
fine, yeah. I'm here at the Pleasure City Council and the impression I've gotten so far is that we're opposed to this. I mean, the city is suing over it, though, obviously.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to brainstorm ways to
No, it's
mitigate
great.
it to the extent possible.
I think it's
guess.
great. I think it's totally within your purview as planning commissioner and the citizens advisory committee. So bring them on. I think, when you start saying these things, what I think about is, how could we actually make it happen
Yeah.
for the code and process and all the other state laws of clear and objective. There's a lot that is like starts going. And so we need some time to digest it, figure out if there's some.
I am curious about the ADA one though, what I mentioned to our attorney.
Yeah.
Requiring no parking spaces in the disabled area means no ADA spots. And yet, interestingly, throughout the rest of this, that it says if you do provide parking, the first priority is to who? Disabled, but we're not gonna, I mean, it's so weird.
Yeah.
But I am curious about that. Is that gonna get us in trouble if we don't require at least ADA spots or what supersedes what here, I don't know. It's very federal.
Yeah.
But it's the state's making us do it, so it's through the state and Fed.
Yes, I think that's a perfect way to say it is like it's state mandated us to do something. They passed a law that didn't comply with Title VI or whatever it is, then the federal government needs to come down on the state.
Okay.
I think,
Thank you.
are we gonna have another work session? Because I think the brainstorming and getting.
Yes,
these
yeah.
Yeah,
ideas
we got
out
plenty, we
is
got plenty of
important.
work. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, we will continue on in regards to moving forward as I'm
Developing the other two programs.
yes,
Because
Yeah.
then if we're going to hearing it this late spring, I
yes,
think it would be nice if. Some of the ideas or some of the other things, if we could have just a full brainstorming session of things that we could throw out.
yeah, and one of the other requirements, or it should, well, we committed to is definitely a public outreach in regards to like an open house to the community so that they know that this is coming up and it's most likely be more informative just because things are, but then we're hoping by then we'll have some type of direction in regards to the litigation. So,
Can
I
we
think you
find,
mentioned we're acting as the CAC for this, right? So
Right.
we have to do this kind of stuff,
yeah,
talk
Yeah.
about it like that.
Yeah.
No, it's great.
yeah, you are that hat.
I know we're looking at specific code.
Yeah. No, but during the hearing, you have to take your CAC hat off and think of it as a commission.
and this is the right hearing, I just didn't.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, yeah.
time because I didn't wanna,
Even we got months on this.
well, we
Yeah.
don't have that, but I also, when you're saying that public outreach. I don't want the public outreach to be right before the hearing after we've made all the decisions. I would like it to
Right,
be
right.
after. As soon after the appeal decision is made, so that ideas like Dan's come out. And then we get some whiteboards out, because if there's any of these quick code things that we can do that helps modify. That can be implemented at the same time, that's when I would see we could reach out to the public, both with the ideas of what we've. Done so far, but see if other developers or. Other people have.
Right, because one of the stakeholders is definitely the commercial entities that we have to reach out to them and say, hey, this is. But again, we don't know where the litigation's gonna be at that time, so we just do our best. Definitely, if we're having March hearings. Maybe early February or late January. I just don't want it to be within the holidays. It's a
No,
balancing
we'll-
out.
We'll come back to the commission and talk about our open house strategy.
So this has to be implemented when?
We have to have it adopted by, well, June, because it
June 30th of next
it
year,
has to be in effect
July 1.
July 1st.
But they can do that.
So
by-
usually, yeah,
So 2 hearings in June by council, our hearings in May,
Mm-hmm.
so it could be.
February, maybe as far as outreach, but
But we want it after the appeal.
Ooh, yeah.
so that's why we don't know.
I think we just need to schedule it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just need to schedule.
Early March and cross our
Yeah,
fingers.
yeah, we can't. do it
Yeah.
further.
Yeah, we won't know.
Yeah, we just need.
If we.
But we could follow up like after the fact too. I think maybe and do another. Engagement activity with the community to get, additional feedback for what we could do in the future. What may make sense. or a survey. We can do a survey online. There's lots of engagement tools we can do.
Excellent.
But the other side of that is getting people engaged. So that they understand that we're having to do this and you need to get your legislatures voting the right way. If we wait, you know.
There is chatter on this. I mean, it's on
Except for
social
there's
media.
a executive order from the governor.
Right.
So no, because I was thinking
Yeah,
it would be
be
nice
careful.
with that page we have for more information on this on the Sherwood site. A stack of our representatives, state, metro area, where they stand on this issue. So hey, if you don't like it, go talk to these people. If you do like it, go talk to these people.
But if 3414 is coming back up in 2024, we need to get the conversation out there so that
Yes.
at our open house, there'll be a whole board that says, and talk to your legislator
There-
about 3414.
I think there's a common misconception right now that cities have a lot more control over their destiny than we really do in this state any longer. And just this week, there was chatter on social media that there was, even my wife was involved in, and Kim Young jumped in on it because people do not understand that. What is the city doing? We aren't. We have to carry out the edicts of the state. So vote differently. Vote differently.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. So more to come and we'll keep you guys informed. So I think we're gonna move on to the next.
Mhm.
Food cards.
Food cards.
Ricard, wrap up. So we had our last work session about a month ago, September-ish, I think it was. I included all of our changes that we talked about at the work session and did a track change version and a clean version for you all to review.
So you want us to just hit like starting at the beginning? Because like packet page 37 for A4 roof mounted equipment, A parapet, period. Language that we ended on are the parapet that conceals the tallest part of the equipment from the public street. Cause that was the whole ending conversation with that.
That was packet page 37.
Yeah, and it's crazy. It's 4A, 4A.
This one here.
Oh, a
It's
parapet tall
C4.
as the tallest, oh, yeah, a parapet as tall as the tallest part of the,
Equipment. And actually, what we said was a parapet that conceals the tallest part of the equipment from the public street. The intent was just to be able to, because we had something come in where they were just trying to, as long as it's not visible from the public street, they don't need a 12-foot. If the roof mounted equipment, page 37.
So sorry.
Because if the equipment's 4 feet tall and it's in the center of the building, you don't need a 4-foot tall parapet around it. You need it to be not visible from the street.
Yep.
At what distance, what's considered, it comes up in my world, because that's, if I'm standing on the sidewalk right in front of the building, can I see that antenna on the roof? No, but if I'm 3 blocks down, walking down, now I can see it. So within what distance, because that angle is going to change the closer you get. Yeah, I mean, it's just a good question, because it. Anybody have thoughts on that?
The standard is that it needs to be as tall as the equipment, right?
Yeah,
So if that's the case, I mean, that'll block
okay.
unless you're at a higher elevation.
Well, I think what
We had discussed was that we would make it shorter if it's not visible from the public street, but then to your point, okay, so maybe.
but there is a certain line, though. I mean, that we have to draw, so people who might have planning experience, let's hear
I
your
think
guys'
it's,
thoughts.
Okay, so then we just leave
it's
it the
gonna
way
like
it is.
differ on the, like the height of the building.
Okay, then just leave it.
And the
We'll
grade,
just
yeah.
make it. Okay,
Yeah.
never mind. I would have.
Yeah, it is.
to go through every scenario. We can't. Okay. We hire a planner just to do that then.
Yeah. Perfect. We'll just keep it as is.
And then I had 42L. There's no L. I mean, I had an L, but it wasn't added. And maybe it was only in my mind that I added an L. Which was a screening plan.
Oh,
Yeah, I remember.
I remember that.
Like landscape screening?
I'm
No.
sorry, on page 41. When we were talking about utilities, there was a question brought up. On the food card pod site utility standards, was there a standard for propane? Was that? Because they're usually using propane.
I am going to come back and answer that question. Because I didn't answer.
That's. Lisa Page.
Oh, no. Oh, that was.
For the,
Did we already cover your hours question? We don't.
I think, no, we didn't.
EP3, commission will need to consider what hours make the most sense for sites abutting residential properties, back page 40. Clarify on this.
Yep.
Okay. I wrote down 8 to 8, just kind of an off the cuff, but I don't know if that seems too much or too little.
Sunday through Thursday.
What are the noise ordinances in Sherwood? That's what I would probably go with. Quiet hours.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, we could say, day, well, it's kind of weird in our code, we say day hours,
Yeah.
and it's, 7
7
a.m. to 9 p.m.
Mhm.
day hours.
Hence the camping from 9 to 7.
Mhm.
We didn't plan that, but that's, yeah, same.
So 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. is the noise ordinance.
Those are considered day hours where you can have like construction. and Other noise.
Interesting.
Could you go with the noise ordinance and then it's a conditional use, so you could be more restrictive if the situation's so.
Is there
Based on location.
yeah, what about for events and things like that? If somebody wants to have private events in this place, if it's. I'm thinking weddings and things like that.
What page are we on? Where it talks about time restrictions?
40.
Better.
We do have city code, you know, in regard, we do have a noise ordinance, and if anybody wants to have. Events that use there's special code language, amplified. Music, they actually have to get a permit through the city that they either have to get a noise variance permit or a special events permit.
I think we'd probably keep it the same, because if you have a private party and they have a party, that's still an issue, right?
Mhm.
Whether it's private party or the public that's there. I mean, the concern is the impact to the neighbor. So whether it's a private event or it's a public event, it's the same. impact.
Same, 7 to
So they
9.
probably just have to close, and you know, you see companies do that, like close for a private event. So.
But that would only apply to a food cart site that was abutting a residential use area, right?
Correct.
So if it's in an area that wasn't the case, then it'd be whatever the zone requirements are for where they're at.
Which, yeah, I mean, we don't have hours for other zones, so
Yeah, we don't have,
they would,
yeah, we have 24-hour stores, right, in Sherwood.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's a general like
Mm-mm.
business hour restriction, so. Yeah.
To your point about the conditions of approval limitations, it doesn't specifically call out. Modifying hours, should we add that? As one of the conditions of approval?
I think we should.
Mhm.
Might as well.
Cause it lists, air, water, lot sizes. Vehicular access. Money in lieu of parks.
I can be
Signs.
at Howard there somewhere.
Oh, cause it got lined out. Interesting.
Well, it's because those, I had those in there and then. A through M that were crossed out didn't actually line up with our condition of approval language that's in our code.
Oh,
And what I heard from you, what I heard from the commission is that you wanted the conditions of approval to line up with what's in our existing code and 16.8.
C2. Well, we do have requirements for design features. And it's not really a design feature, be an hour.
I would just say limiting the hours,
Hours.
like, yeah, adding it to 6. Where it talks about limiting the number, size, location, height, and lighting of signs, I can say, and,
I would just make it number 9.
or number 9.
Yes, make it number 9.
Make,
Say
change number 8 to
Yeah.
9.
limiting hours of operation.
Mhm.
So would that make the hours of operation part of the hearing then as the conditional use rather than stipulating it here in the code?
Yes.
Okay,
So
just strike the whole line here basically. and
So this says that's the. Under the conditions of, it's a conditional use permit
Right.
and under the conditions of approval, the approval body may oppose conditions of, upon the approval. These conditions may include but are not limited to this whole thing, so we
Yeah.
could add to it.
Perfect.
Question, and I apologize if I asked it before, but by definition, a food cart pod has to have 5 or more units. And so how do we solve the issue of the 5th food cart pod went out of business and there is, so it's no, and it was removed from the site. And now what happens? Because it's not per conditional, it's not conditional, part of the conditional use. Because it's now a definition, the definition says you have, it only exists if there's 5 of them. So I don't know.
But isn't the space still leasable as far as where someone could come on in and put another food cart in?
Sure. I mean, that's how you wanna look at it. It's not what the definition says right now. It says it consists of 5 or more mobile food units.
Right.
So you could maybe tweak the definition a little bit to say it must be designed to accommodate or.
For application.
Or something.
I don't think that's what council
Yeah,
wanted.
council was, I think to address that, because this is in Title 16, which is our development code.
I think that becomes like a code issue, really,
Compliance, I mean,
Yeah.
On who? Yeah, it's.
on the property owner.
business, I mean, as soon as you're out of compliance with the development code.
Okay, so the property owners or whoever runs, their job is to make sure they've got a bench of people and lock them open, yeah.
Yep.
The threat is, we unlikely get here, but the threat is we revoke your land use permit if you're not in compliance with the code. So,
Mhm.
you know, that's.
And I guess it works both ways too, though. If we get an application and like, this is great, you have a beautiful pavilion, you have 4 spots because the space so dictates. Sorry, we have to deny you because you don't meet the definition.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
that's okay. That's what
That's
council,
okay.
that's what
That's what
council wants.
Because
They want a big food cart pod. That's what
Okay.
they're looking for, so.
Okay.
I think the concern would be like, hey, like we get a not very nice food cart pod, and to be honest, I've seen it. There's one by my house and it wasn't well designed. It was really small and just one by one, the carts just started disappearing. And I think, you know, if that's the case, we don't want to allow, I don't know, in my opinion, we wouldn't want to allow a struggling food cart pod. It's just, you're not in compliance. Sorry.
Mhm.
So it puts some pressure on them to maintain it and to keep their, you know, their operators happy and all that sort of stuff, so.
Fees appropriate.
Do you have a vacancy time limit then?
Yeah, and that's the art of code compliance.
Mhm.
It's like, hey, you're out of compliance, let's talk about it. And usually on land use cases, like it's not uncommon to have land use violations and you know, they're fairly serious because it's related to the property. It's not, I'm not talking residential, I'm talking commercial, industrial. And so we usually give time, 6 months or so, we give plenty of time to address the issue. And if it's an ongoing issue, keep giving them warnings and then eventually we'll plug on.
I don't know if it would be an issue, but is there any concern around like having food cart pods, multiple food cart pods too close together? Or anything?
The market's probably gonna drive it.
Right, it probably wouldn't really.
That's better
No.
pod.
Yeah.
We could, I mean, we could probably say, I mean, we would want to give them a heads up prior to them getting to you guys, but on your conditional use, I think there's something that talks about community, like. I don't know, it's not the general, but do they have to comply with the conditional use permit approval
Yes.
criteria?
Yes.
So in there, it's gonna talk about like really generally, there's a need in the community and stuff like that. So I think if we got really strict with that, we could say, sorry, we already have one on this block and we just don't have a need for another one. Sorry.
Justin, are you talking about the individual food carts or are you talking about having multiple pods in the city?
I was thinking at multiple pods, you know, like, again, I wasn't sure if it would actually materialize as an issue, but you know, I know that there's language in either shopping centers or franchises that like, you know, you're not allowed to be so close to another existing one or something like that.
I think our code would probably prevent, like, the code is really intended to make it a permanent pod. It's not, you know, this
Right.
very light approach that we've seen when they really started getting going in Portland and other places. And so someone's gonna have to be really serious.
And that's kind of what I'm
It's a big
thinking.
investment. It's
And-
kind of the goal. of
And
this.
that's what I'm thinking about is like. What can be, what is being done to try to incentivize them to like make a really good food cart pod to begin with, so that like, it's not just like kind of thrown together thing that someone else then like
Yeah,
has.
well, hopefully the standards that
hope-
we have drafted, because everything's got to be permanent, right?
Mhm.
Permanent utility connections, all that, strict design standards, and then the conditional use approval criteria. And like, I mean, it, if even if staff, you know, the first sort of line of bringing up the quality, if it's not there, is staff. And if you guys are like, hey, sorry, this is even with staff's comments, and oftentimes we do bring it up to you guys, hey, there's still problems. Absolutely, raise it again in hearing, and if they want to get a food cart pod in, you guys gotta be okay with it in terms of design and everything else, so that's the process, you know, I think it's not residential. It's not residential, you know, you guys have some discretion here, so. Yeah, we encourage you guys, bring up the quality, you know, it's what we're looking for, so. If we haven't done it already, staff will.
I had dinner at the Beaverton food carts last Saturday, so
Yeah,
big fan.
yeah.
Love that facility. It's a cool facility.
Yeah, that's what we're going for. That one's massive. That one's huge. But
Is the fire pit new? They have that fire pit out there now? I don't remember that from before.
But yeah, that's what we're going for. We want it nice, you know, permanent. Families can hang out, kids can, you know, run around. Parents aren't concerned about the kid. We want a gathering space, you know, is what we're looking for. Like Beaverton.
Anything else? So next steps here, I'm gonna make a couple more edits, and then I'm gonna send it off to our city attorney's office for review. And then I would expect us to go to public hearing early next year.
Before we adjourn then, what are, like, that's a couple of months from now. What are, it seems like we don't have,
Oh,
what's going to go on
for
November,
planning
December,
commission.
yeah.
Great, thank you for bringing that up, Jean. So we have one meeting scheduled in November 14th. And that'll be a work session, and we are going to be talking, we're having a discussion on planning commission's like work plan for next year. I know that in previous years, our council did a SWOT analysis every December that we turned in. They are going to be discussing kind of, you know, maybe an alternative method or alternative way to get feedback from boards and commissions. And so I should know what that's gonna look like by November 14th. And we'll just sit around, have a conversation about, you know, what planning commission is interested in.
I would see Dan, I'm just gonna throw this out, your concerns for the CPEC thing. Also could help drive our work program and the things that we want council to look at. Those are the things that as a commission, if we could. Start forward thinking and start, not forward thinking, but proactively managing what's coming before us with some ideas that we see that code needs to be improved. Or how to mitigate what's going on with the state, that's.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that in a work session with the. Whatever the SWOT analysis or whatever council's looking for, so that we can ask council to dedicate. Staff time to our ideas about code implementation to improve and maintain our quality of life here.
Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Is that, because that's what, well,
That is what we're wanting from the boards and commissions is like you're the experts doing this work and we need to hear from you what you would like to see for your city, essentially.
that's how they approached it when they had all the chairs come to the meeting, was to say. They want us to. Ask what we want on our work program so that they know what time and staff and resources and funding is gonna have to be allocated if we want to go.
Right, makes sense, makes total sense.
And then after that, it's the holiday season and we don't have any public hearings scheduled for December, so you have the month off.
Take a break.
Take a break.
Take a break.
And we'll see you in the new year.
Sorry for the newer commissioners, because they didn't go through the hell we went through 2 years ago. It's like, hey, this is huge.
Planning Commissioner hazing. You want to push it through?
Using,
Was it not?
I already know I won't be here on the 14th.
Okay.
Epic.
It's hard to remember what terribleness was when.
All as a volunteer, Justin. Oh, man, thank you.
All right, any other commissioners, comments, questions?
If you didn't hear, I won't be here on the 14th meeting, I'll be out of town.
Okay.
I'll probably be gone as well, so.
All right, well, if you
I'll
have,
be checking in with the two of you before the 14th to get any feedback.
yeah, if you have items, agenda, things that you want to see on the work program.
Just more dinners. That's my
Both of you have been here long enough to have been through awkward, unsuccessful code wrangling. So if you have any things that really just sit wrong with, you know, that's.
All right. Meeting's over.
All right,